The world watched with bated breath as representatives from the United States and China met in Geneva. The picturesque city, known for its history of diplomacy, was once again the stage for high-stakes negotiations. The mission to find common ground on the tumultuous battleground of trade. Both nations had much to gain and even more to lose as they navigated the complex web of tariffs and trade barriers. The stakes were high, the rhetoric even higher. Each side came armed with demands and concessions, hoping to tilt the balance in their favor. Former President Donald Trump, never one for understatement, proclaimed a total reset in U.S.-China trade relations. His bold statements often set the tone for the negotiations, adding a layer of unpredictability. This bold assertion, delivered via his preferred platform of Truth Social, sent ripples through the global economy. Investors and analysts scrambled to interpret the potential impacts. Was this the dawn of a new era of cooperation, or merely another chapter in a protracted economic conflict? The world waited with cautious optimism. The announcement came after days of intense negotiations, with delegations closeted in marathon sessions. The long hours and exhaustive discussions were a testament to the complexity of the issues at hand. Details remained scarce, shrouded in the kind of diplomatic ambiguity that often accompanies high-level talks. Both sides were tight-lipped, fueling speculation and rumors, yet the mere suggestion of a breakthrough was enough to ignite a flurry of speculation and analysis. Experts weighed in, dissecting every word and gesture for clues. Financial markets, ever sensitive to geopolitical tremors, responded with cautious optimism. Stocks fluctuated as investors reacted to the ebb and flow of the negotiations. The possibility of a total reset held profound implications, not just for the two economic giants but for the entire world. A new trade agreement could reshape global economic dynamics. The US and China, the world's two largest economies, had been locked in a trade war for years, a tit-for-tat exchange of tariffs that had disrupted global supply chains and fueled economic uncertainty. This ongoing conflict had far-reaching consequences affecting industries and consumers worldwide. The hope was that a resolution could bring stability and predictability back to the global market. The prospect of a truce, let alone a reset, offered a glimmer of hope for a more stable and predictable global trading system. The world watched, hopeful that this time, diplomacy would prevail. The Geneva summit was not a sudden outbreak of peace and harmony. It was a meticulously planned event, the result of countless hours of behind-the-scenes negotiations and strategic maneuvering. It was the culmination of months of back-channel diplomacy, where every word and gesture was carefully calculated to avoid missteps. A carefully choreographed dance between two wary superpowers, each with its own set of priorities and concerns. Both sides had their reasons for seeking a rapprochement. The stakes were high, and the world was watching closely. The U.S. economy, while still robust, was showing signs of strain from the ongoing trade war. Businesses were feeling the pinch, and the public was growing increasingly concerned. Inflation was on the rise, and businesses were grappling with supply chain disruptions. The economic landscape was becoming more challenging by the day. For China, the stakes were arguably even higher. The trade war had taken a toll on its export-oriented economy, and the pressure was mounting. The trade war had taken a toll on its export-oriented economy, and the country was eager to secure access to the vast American market. The economic slowdown was palpable. The country was eager to secure access to the vast American market, which was crucial for its continued growth and stability. Moreover, China was facing growing pressure from the Biden administration on a range of issues, including human rights and intellectual property theft. The international scrutiny was intensifying. A trade deal with the U.S. could help to ease some of that pressure. It was seen as a potential lifeline for both economies. The negotiations were tense and protracted, with both sides driving a hard bargain. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation and caution. The U.S. delegation, led by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, pressed China to address long-standing concerns about unfair trade practices, including forced technology transfer and intellectual property theft. These were non-negotiable points for the U.S. China, for its part, demanded an end to the tariffs that had been imposed by the Trump administration. The tariffs were seen as a significant barrier to economic recovery. After days of intense negotiations, the two sides emerged with what they described as a framework for future talks. It was a tentative step forward, but a step nonetheless. The details were vague, but the agreement suggested a willingness to at least explore the possibility of a broader trade deal. it was a glimmer of hope in an otherwise uncertain landscape. Whether this framework would translate into concrete action remained to be seen. The world watched with bated breath, hoping for a resolution that could bring stability and growth. The trade war between the US and China was not an isolated event. It was the culmination of years of simmering tensions over trade imbalances, intellectual property rights, and China's growing economic might. The seeds of the conflict were sown in the early 2000s when China joined the World Trade Organization. China's entry into the WTO ushered in an era of unprecedented economic growth for the country. Chinese goods flooded the global market, often at prices that undercut American competitors. The U.S. trade deficit with China ballooned, reaching a record $419 billion in 2018. American manufacturers complained that they were being unfairly disadvantaged by China's currency manipulation, lax labor standards, and intellectual property theft. The Trump administration came into office promising to take a tough stance on China. In 2018, Trump imposed tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, triggering a tit-for-tat trade war between the world's two largest economies. China retaliated with tariffs of its own, targeting American agricultural products and other key exports. The trade war dragged on for years, with both sides escalating tariffs and imposing new trade barriers. The conflict had a ripple effect throughout the global economy, disrupting supply chains, raising prices for consumers, and fueling uncertainty in financial markets. Section 4. Trump's Tariff Logic, Protectionism, and Its Discontents. Donald Trump's approach to trade was a radical departure from the free trade orthodoxy that had guided American policy for decades. His administration's trade policies were characterized by a strong emphasis on protectionism, which aimed to shield American industries from foreign competition. This marked a significant shift from the globalist perspective that had dominated previous administrations. Trump viewed trade through a zero-sum lens, believing that one country's gain necessarily came at the expense of another. This perspective led him to adopt a combative stance in trade negotiations, often framing them as battles that the United States needed to win. His rhetoric frequently emphasized the need to put America first and to protect American jobs from being outsourced to other countries. He saw China's economic rise as a direct threat to American prosperity, and he was determined to use tariffs and other protectionist measures to reverse the trend. Trump's administration accused China of unfair trade practices, including intellectual property theft and forced technology transfers, which they argued gave Chinese companies an unfair advantage in the global market. Trump's tariff strategy was based on several flawed assumptions. He believed that imposing tariffs on Chinese goods would pressure China into making significant concessions. However, this approach underestimated the resilience and strategic capabilities of the Chinese government. First, he believed that tariffs would force China to make concessions on trade and intellectual property theft. This assumption was rooted in the belief that China would prioritize maintaining access to the lucrative American market over its own economic policies and practices. However, China proved to be a more formidable adversary than Trump had anticipated. Rather than capitulating to American demands, China responded with its own set of tariffs, targeting key American industries and agricultural products. Instead of backing down, China retaliated with tariffs of its own, targeting American farmers and businesses. This retaliation hit the American agricultural sector particularly hard, as China was a major market for American soybeans, pork, and other agricultural products. Second, Trump assumed that American consumers and businesses would be willing to absorb the costs of his tariffs. He believed that the economic benefits of protecting American industries would outweigh the higher prices that consumers would have to pay for imported goods. This assumption proved to be equally flawed. The tariffs acted as a tax on American consumers, raising prices for a wide range of goods, from everyday household items to larger purchases like washing machines and electronics. Tariffs acted as a tax on American consumers, raising prices for everything from washing machines to soybeans. This increase in prices disproportionately affected lower-income households, who spend a larger share of their income on imported goods. American businesses were also hurt by the tariffs, as they faced higher costs for imported inputs and lost access to the Chinese market. Many businesses that relied on global supply chains found themselves struggling to adapt to the new trade environment. Trump's tariff war was a costly failure. It disrupted global supply chains, increased costs for American businesses, and led to retaliatory measures that hurt American exporters. It did not achieve its stated objectives of reducing the trade deficit or forcing China to change its behavior. Instead, the trade deficit with China actually increased during Trump's presidency, and there was little evidence of significant changes in Chinese trade practices. Instead, it inflicted significant pain on American consumers, businesses, and farmers. The long-term impacts of these policies are still being felt today, as the global trade landscape continues to evolve in response to the disruptions caused by the tariff wars. Section 5. China's Response, Retaliation, and Economic Resilience. China's response to Trump's tariffs was a mix of defiance and pragmatism. Beijing was initially caught off guard by the Trump administration's aggressive trade policies. However, China quickly adapted, retaliating with tariffs of its own and seeking to reduce its dependence on the American market. China targeted its retaliatory tariffs strategically, aiming to inflict maximum pain on Trump's political base. American farmers, who relied heavily on exports to China, were hit particularly hard. China also sought to diversify its trading partners, signing new trade deals with countries like Brazil and Russia. At the same time, China took steps to cushion the blow of American tariffs on its own economy. The government provided subsidies to businesses, increased infrastructure spending, and eased monetary policy. These measures helped to offset some of the negative impact of the trade war on Chinese growth. China's response to the trade war demonstrated its economic resilience and its determination to become a global economic superpower. While the trade war undoubtedly had a negative impact on the Chinese economy, it also accelerated Beijing's efforts to reduce its dependence on the U.S. and to develop its own technological capabilities.